I was thinking.
Like,
By the time you get. Cool.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Oh.
We do have a quorum now.
We do, all
We
right.
do have a quorum, so I have started the recording. And Madam Chair, are you able to kick us off?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is 9:05. I will now call the meeting to order. Hope you're all having a great day so far. The first item on our agenda this morning is public comment. Do we have any guests in the room or online that would like to provide a comment? I'm not seeing anything. Anybody on that I can't see on screen?
Not seeing any hands raised or comments in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So no public comment. Then we will move on then to the next point, which is discussion, oral communication, and member updates. This is an opportunity for members to share updates that they would like to share with the group related to the work that we do. Are there any discussions or oral comments? Okay, I'm not hearing or seeing anything. Am I missing something on your end, Jacob?
I'm not seeing any hands raised or any comments in the chat.
Okay. Then we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of minutes from April 25th, 2024. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
if I can interject, Chair, the meeting minutes are for June 27th, 2024.
Thank you for that correction. I just now saw that that's the right date. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All right, we'll now vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
I.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay, thank you. So the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Molly, would you like to share your report?
Thank you, Chair Rouse. Good morning, everyone. Ooh, I hope we're all awake. There's coffee here, there's snacks if we need to liven up, but we've had a couple of great, phenomenal days. I will say with the annual conference of Housing Oregon, which this year we've experienced the record high number of participants and frankly panels. There were about 8 each session, and it just shows the strength and resilience and frankly the growth of the overall affordable housing industry, community development certainly over the last 20 years. So it was really exciting. I can't help myself, Deanna. Can you I want to show you pictures?
Yeah.
Event.
Oh, fun. I'll share with
I
you.
this morning. Just a few that I did on my phone. There's the gala last night or 2 nights ago with the awards ceremony. That's just kind of a snapshot of just how crowded the room was. There's a few of us at our table, Washington County. There's some, there's Jillian from SEPA, our partner, and our staff and Bonner. Here's a panel I got to be on called Mentoring the Next Generation of Affordable Housing Talent. You know you're getting old when they start talking about mentoring other people. And I'm like, wait, I still need to be mentored. Here we are, a sort of a fabulous panel. I got to be on with some other leaders who've been doing that. We've been doing this work for a long time and have been bring the next generation. At Farm Worker Housing Development Corporation. So she and I had fun stories of how we first got to know each other back in the day and how do we elevate particularly potential employees of color or interns of color, or how do we sort of keep diversifying our whole industry with sort of really 2 tracks. Slides, really how do we promote more educational opportunities and frankly, more sort of workforce, or job opportunities in a variety of different ways. So it's sort of a moment of nostalgic, but just wanted to also elevate. A few people in this room got recognized or 2 nights ago. Haley's project. Haley Ward.
Thank you.
Ward, Save and CDC, and a project right in the left of Portland.
Yes, in Northeast Portland, yeah, with we nominated our client, we nominated the project, but we wanted to give the client the recognition. They're a small CDC that hasn't done development since the 70s and hasn't touched their properties since the 90s. And so they thought very creatively and combined or developed 2 lots concurrent with each other in an effort to be more competitive, and did so successfully. And it was a real launching point for them, and now they're off to do more development. And so we felt like they deserved a lot of recognition there for achieving something that is difficult already to do, and then without, with a small organization, it's more difficult. So they were thrilled. They were so excited at the award, and so it was just exciting to be there with them and feel their joy. So yeah.
We were like, she's out here in Washington County helping us too.
So yeah.
And then Ryan got to be, your company, Pinnacle, was on a few panels.
We had a few discussions, and every year we try to participate, bring good education to the masses that show up. To your point, 6-7 years ago, the conference was a third this size, and it's great seeing the energy renewed every year by new faces.
Speaking of energy renewed, I got to also learn more about different ways how we share our narrative in what we call affirmative framing. And so we get so used to all the things, all the challenges that we face, but how do we tell the stories of people whose lives, not just about their housing status, it really was about this person now has an opportunity that they haven't had with the education or with a job, and now they can care for their kids. They don't have to rely on us anymore, whatever it might be. So it's just sort of a reminder for all of us that we can build the positive framing as we deal with all these challenges. The lunch session, though, did highlight we are facing some pretty unprecedented times here in housing, and with incredible amount of huge cost escalations, interest rate hikes, challenges on construction, challenges in operations. How do we do supportive housing and meet our goal in a time of a fentanyl crisis? So there was some sobering moments too. I just wanted to give a little bit of space to that, because I think it's a good reminder of we've been through certain challenging periods in this industry over the last 20 years before. But the panel really reminded us, like Kathy Swift, we don't have low interest rates anymore that kind of withstood the moment, and also inflationary factors are kind of creating additional headwinds than we've ever really faced before. So there's some real more challenging, more conversations I believe we'll have to have, because there's a lot of properties that are there's a solvency question for the industry of how much we can really absorb that happened to us so quickly. What does that fair tell for what's the way we can tell that story? But also I think has to be serious room for doing things completely different. We have to think about things, even like how we do our performance or contingencies, how we hedge a little bit more, but also structurally, what are we doing that's maybe contributing to these challenges? I think that I'm saying this because I think there's a lot of energy gearing up for the legislative session, and a lot of more momentum I've ever seen before around preservation. Preservation on the other side of that coin, of course, gets into lots of solvency questions and structural challenges that we face. Every project will need preservation. So there's sort of a normalcy to it, but there's also a convergence, I would say, of how how do we deal with projects to the finish line and keep up with production you know, it's always gonna be a both and to that work. But there's also, part of that is how do we also potentially ask for more resources to help people through the challenges that they continue to face around paying rent and rising rent escalation. So I think we're hearing there's still a huge priority. It's one of the 3 top priorities for the governor, that with behavioral health, and June the 3rd.
Childcare.
What's that?
Childcare.
Might be, no, I'll get, I don't want to misspeak on the governor's priorities, but definitely behavioral health and housing policies for sure are in there. And it also is, I think, top of mind for us as we're going to be, as you all are going to be hosting our housing forum in the next couple months, and we're wanting to really tie into the work of our legislative communities and the work that our lobbyists are really just kind of riding that wave of the energy last 2 days. But anyway, we've had also lots of open, a lot of great things that have happened over the last month. I just, very quickly, you guys have my reports, but I just wanted to recognize this group and also the Solutions Council, particularly Melinda Bell. When are you on?
She's online.
Melinda, thank you for helping.
Hi, I'm here.
host. Yay. We got to host our first ever listening session in August.
Yes.
That was really sobering and eye-opening, I think, for folks, but we particularly had one at the library focused on people with lived experiences. And Linda, did you want to say a few words about a listening session at all?
Just like you said, it was sobering. The table that I was hosting, it wasn't really anything that I hadn't heard before, but it gave us hope that we can do better. You know what I mean? Like there was, for instance, there was a woman and a gentleman at my table who were staying in shelter and seemed like they weren't getting anywhere at the pods. And just by having a conversation with them and explaining to them how the process works, it seemed to, because I gave her my phone number and she called me the next day. And it seemed to give her ease to kind of know how the process works. I'm a housing navigator, and different programs have different pieces and different things that they can do. And when you have a homeless person who's been on the streets forever, how long, and they learn about a program, whether it be permanent supportive housing, recovery, reentry housing, or those other housing programs, they don't understand that they're different and they have different ways of getting access to them. So I was able to explain that to her. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. You know, once we get the application, once you get to the application stage, it can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks before they even contact you back to approve your application. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And also explaining to them, like, if you want a shelter referral, you need to put in for the shelter referral. You know, you don't just get put in a shelter because that's where they put you. No, you have to ask for specifically to be put in a shelter if you're on the streets. And you want to go there instead of a pod or like another Just Compassion or something like that. So just giving them more information to how things are being operated within these umbrellas under Washington County.
Thank you, Melinda. It's a good reminder that people have agency in the process of experiencing process. We've also had a few chances for lots of celebrations this last month as well. We opened up yet another affordable housing bond called Plaza Los Amigos con Bienestar y Reach. We got it's in there. What a gorgeous thank you. Wow. And it's beautifully designed.
It's 113.
Yeah. It was great collaboration when 2 nonprofits come together, leveraging each other's strengths, and then we can be a financing partner through bonds, as well as through our Housing Opportunity Fund, through our Office of Community Development, Shannon's right here, and also through project-based Section 8s. It's really crucial bringing in the project-based Section 8s because people can pay 2-bedroom rent, affordable rents can be as low as $701. So unbelievable. We also, it's sort of political season as well. We've had we toured HUD officials who came out from DC to show what's like on the West Coast. It's very different than how they experience housing homelessness on the East Coast. And that was also got to tour Nueva Esperanza. Got to tour Heartwood Commons and Safe Rest Village, the Loa United Methodist Church, right there, and show the full continuum of various housing and shelter options that we're able to provide here in Washington County because the voters approved 2 regional measures between the Metro Bond and the Support Housing Services measure. So the HUD official came out, Hunter said, we don't see a lot of communities come straight to HUD and say, please fund all of our issues. You guys have stepped up first and foremost, and now you can come to HUD and say, hey, we should respect and honor what you guys have talked about. Also, we got a chance to really celebrate with our residents, the residents who've been going through renovation with our Affordable Housing Preservation Phase 1 work. We got to have a luncheon for them. So a lot of staff got to be there, and unfortunately had a kids cross country meet. And so having it quite work out, but it's just be able to have that time with residents is really special. Especially as we're entering into fall and school starting. Got to also tour Congresswoman Salinas, who's running for re-election of the congressional districts here in Oregon. She hosted a tour of a Pathfinder, which was the very first Metro Bond project that we opened up here. Did I say, what did I say? Pathfinder. I'm sorry. I looked at my notes. Pathfinder. Pathfinder. Well, it is a way to.
Yes.
Pathfinder kind of. It just happens to be called Viewfinder. And it really is a really gorgeous home. With lots of art and it was great getting that kind of recognition. But really the best part, not the last, but the best was seeing all the campers going to Camp Rosenbaum, Janet and other folks and Jacob and other, Melissa got to really welcome kids who got to spend a whole week out on the coast with all kinds of different mentors and counselors with different housing authorities and other leaders come and spend a week with those kids. It's kids who, in some cases, have never been to camp before. I think it's established a whole new relationship, really intense way with those other kids, and that's make lifelong memories. I love to see the kids come off the bus.
Thank
All right,
you.
with that, open for any questions.
Hi, Molly, it's John Epstein. I'm just curious, for one, I apologize for being a few minutes late. You mentioned there was a grand opening with Reach, and was it, anyways, when that opened, I'm just curious, maybe I missed it. Did you let us know it was opening?
That? Yeah. I knew because I follow you on all of the social medias.
But I'm just curious, we talked about just inviting the advisory committee to openings, and maybe it came out and I just missed it. But if it didn't go out, could we just try to get that on camp? Let us know, because
Just follow Bienestar on social media, like.
It was all over the social media.
Duly noted, John, our apologies. We will close that loop, and sure you guys will apply for future ones, but yeah.
also when
If
they
anyone
go
wants
to
a tour, I'll just offer, we'd be happy to host a tour of any members of the committee. So.
Okay. Oh, great, thanks. I mean, it was not, it's not critical of you. I'm just saying, I was just trying to we've talked about trying to make sure we get invited to things that people, can see things. So, I'm just curious, when they go to camp, do you know where they go on the coast or what camp they went to? And how many people attend?
Called Camp Riley.
Uh-huh.
And I
Warrington,
believe
Oregon.
in Warrenton,
On the coast,
Oregon.
yeah.
It's a former, is it Coast Guard site?
Okay.
I think it's through like a Navy base.
Maybe and it's dedicated, the Rosenbaum family has sponsored this camp to be dedicated or partially to sponsor this week-long opportunity for the last like several decades now.
Oh, great.
So it's a rare opportunity and it is, do you know how many total kids
19.
kids go?
Or we had a slot of 25, but 19 ended up going.
But it's for public housing.
Oh, for like in
kids
total,
all over the
100.
whole
Yeah, it's like
state.
150.
Like 150-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I was just curious as to the numbers and where it was. Thank you.
Well, it's a good reminder because Camp Rosenbaum is a nonprofit and they, I'm sure, always are welcoming donations and
Volunteers.
sponsorships and volunteers.
Yes.
So well, that's another part.
Are you saying, excuse me, are you saying that the kids just went there or that they're going to be going? Because I used to hear about that and get letters about that from my kids, but I don't have a child that's the age right now to go. So I wasn't sure if it was still going on yearly.
Oh, yeah, it happened in August. It happens every year in the summer. And kids ages 9 to 11 can go. So yeah, sometimes if there's no kids who fall within that age range, obviously they're not eligible, but yeah, we've had a couple kids this year, 19 kids joined, so hopefully in the next year, there's other opportunities for families to participate as well.
That's awesome. I hear it's amazing camp.
It is, yeah. The kids loved it. It was really sweet getting to see them off the bus and share their experiences.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments for Molly? Not hearing or seeing any, then we can move on to the next item. It does not seem that we have any action items today, so we can go on to item number 7, which is the staff liaison update. Beaneth, would you like to share those updates?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just a couple updates for y'all. We do have an October meeting, so please attend. We don't have a November and December meeting because we have the housing forum. We also have our luncheon, which is happening, it happens every year. We will be sending out a poll after this meeting, so if you can fill that out as soon as possible. I think our deadline is for the 10th, just so we can kind of prepare for planning for the luncheon. That would be great. Another update regarding our meeting minutes, in order to adhere to a public meeting rules and be respectful of staff capacity, we're going to be uploading our recordings on YouTube. So say nice things, I'm just kidding. In addition to posting our meeting minutes. In the past, we drafted all our minutes word to word. So obviously that took up some of our capacity, but now we'll have a recording and then a condensed version of our meeting minutes. So just giving y'all that update. I just want to make sure y'all were clear about that. And then we do have a new recruitment cycle happening. We are going to be recruiting for 3 positions, the veterans position, finance, because Fernando left us this year, and then urban regional planner position. So if y'all have any connections or you think someone would be interested, I'll send y'all that information. Would really love if y'all can spread the word. So we'll be having our recruitment within the next couple months. So if you know anyone, please let me know. And then we do, so because we're not meeting in November and December, we will be having to elect a chair and a vice chair. We hope to do the elections in October. So we just want to be mindful of timing. Obviously, in order for this group to be successful, we need the leader of 2 chairs. So we are going to be reaching out to y'all individually to see if there's any interest in participating as chairs or being part of that, putting your name in the hat. So October will be a time for voting. We do ask that you be here if you can, just so we can have the voting done that way. But hopefully we'll have names before the October meeting. So there could be opportunity for you to vote outside of that space early through a proxy or email. And then you only get one vote, so make sure that you're participating in that. But yeah, that's just information about that for October. I don't know if there's any clarification on that or.
So my
Lots of
joke,
updates.
do we need to study ranked voting for this?
Maybe it doesn't come to that, but.
A lot of literature out right now on ranked voting in Portland. It's sort of interesting. Anyways.
Thank you for sharing those points. Anything else, Bianna?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right, any questions or comments?
What's the date for the forum?
Yes, November 22nd. We'll be sending out the save the dates real soon. Very, very soon.
There's lots of good dates on page.
Yes, on your
Four.
packet, yeah.
I was putting in a list.
Okay,
That's what this is like. Yeah.
all right, any other questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing any, then we'll move on to the next piece of business, which is ongoing business. So I will turn it over to the staff member to share. It looks like it's regarding section 18, if I'm reading this correctly.
I just wanted to let you guys know, we're going to give you a couple of updates on ongoing programs. The first is a section 18 dispo, which we've already presented, and they just want to keep you updated. And there will be a presentation to Al Habad next week. But we wanted to get your early feedback. The next one is also a presentation on preservation. And again, also seeking your feedback. Turn it over to my colleague, Melissa Daly.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here to talk about our Section 18 disposition plan. My name is Melissa Daly. I'm our Section 18 Senior Housing Program coordinator. So today I'm going to go over in this presentation a summary and map of our Section 18 homes. A few updates of what we've been doing over the last couple of months. Oh, you can move one slide. Yeah. And look at our proposed disposition plan framework along with a diagram of our sales and some sales examples. Our next steps for this fall and a requested action from your committee. Next. So this map shows the location of our 60 Section 18 homes. And Section 18 is the sale of public housing. So we have 244 units of single family public housing. And we are going to permanently remove those from our public housing portfolio. And so they will be, then this framework is going to explain how we do that, how we sell those homes. And as you can see in that table below, the locations of the homes, they're all 3 or 4 bedrooms, and also the years built, most of the homes being at least 40 years old, with the exception of those ones built in the 90s. So they're older homes, and we do have a few vacant units as well, seven vacant units right now. So we do need to get those, especially those homes sold. Next slide. So over the last few months, as our staffing has settled in, we've been able to tackle a few items, such as meeting with community-based organizations on how we should approach the sale of these homes. We've also met with the jurisdictions of Beaverton, Tigard, and Hillsborough in regards to the homes that are in their local area. We've had quite a few communications with HUD, and they're anticipating the framework that we're going to talk about in a few minutes in order for us to be able to move forward on the relocation of the residents as well as the sales. And we have, we issued an RFP for a relocation consultant. And, yeah, and then we're gonna talk about the disposition plan framework. So, our overall, framework principles are to create affordable homeownership opportunities and produce funding that we can use as sort of a source of gap funding for affordable housing projects that we have here at the Housing Authority. We're also looking at this as the one Washington County approach and really trying to build on the work that the Office of Community Development has done with their down payment assistance program. And also using an umbrella of equity and transparency while creating the framework, as well as in our dealing with our, especially in dealing with our residents and the relocation portion. So you can go to the next slide. So what we're planning on for, or what we're presenting is in this selling diagram of the 60 units is that any homes sold to affordable buyers will have a 10% discount. And so what is an affordable buyer? We have different tiers. We're calling them tier 1, 2, and 3. And tier 1 is our current residents. And by law, if you go through the Section 18 disposition, you have to offer the homes to purchase to the current residents. So those are our tier 1. Tier 2 are then, so whatever's not sold in tier 1 will then move to tier 2. And that is through partnerships with community-based organizations that are either working as a community land trust and will go in with a approved buyer to purchase those homes, or with a community-based organization that would provide down payment assistance. So yeah, tier 2, that's the CBO down payment assistance programs that we're going across the bottom, or the permanent affordability, which are also AKA land trusts. We also are developing a rent to own program within tier 2 and with our community-based organizations. And then out there on the other side, we can sell homes at no discount to tier 3, which would be any homes that go through tier 2 and tier 3 are not sold. Those would be homes sold on the market. So we can move forward to the next.
Would you entertain a couple of questions on this slide, or do you want to go through?
Presentation.
Sure, sure.
So here's our overall framework, the big picture items that we're proposing for how to sell the homes. So the buyers are first-time home buyers that live or work in Washington County. Those are tier 1 and tier 2. Their income is up to 100% of AMI. We're not setting a floor because the nonprofit organizations themselves have their programs to do that within, and it also just depends on how much down payment assistance they're able to bring to the table, in addition to the 10% discount that we will be providing. The third item there is off the selling price, so that will be off the current market value of the home. The subsidy would be would have partial forgiveness starting at 10 years. And then increase by 20% every 5 years. So 20% in year 10, and then in year 15, another 20, in year 20, 25, and then at 30 years of owning the home, the 10% discount would be, but the subsidy would be erased, then homeownership would own outright. So recapture though is, if somebody sells at year 12 and they've received that 20% subsidy, the 80% remaining would go back to the community-based organization and reused for the same purpose. There would be, we anticipate quite a bit of leveraging of other down payment assistance or other sources as allowed for the community organizations that do land trusts and there's, tends to be quite a bit of different layers of subsidy that allow these home buyers to purchase the homes. So that's again in tier 1 and 2, as you can see the last few things I've talked about out on the right. And then for selecting buyers, we would do through a combination of preferences and a lottery. So this is tier 2 as well. And some of those preferences, as we propose, are buyer readiness as well as permanent affordability. So that's our overall framework as we are also presenting to the Housing Authority Board of Directors. And in the next slide, we can look at how this would work for a tier 1 buyer. So again, tier 1, current resident of Section 18 home, they'll receive a 10% discount. They can choose to either work with a private mortgage lender or to work with a nonprofit CBO, receive home buyer education, down payment assistance, or work with a land trust model. And just for to kind of set the stage a little bit, the current residents who are at 80% AMI or higher, there are 3 out of the 60 units that we have. And in fact, of the 53 that currently have residents that are inhabited. And then in the 50 to 80% AMI, we have 60 residents. And so we're saying in that 50 to 80% AMI, home ownership is possible just based on AMI. We're not all talking about their credit score, their debt to income ratio, any other aspects that are also taken into account when you are trying to qualify for a mortgage. And then in that 30 to 50% AMI category, we have 12 residents. Homeownership here is possible in the land trust model. There are organizations that do serve down to the 40 or 45% AMI. It's not the most common, but it's not a thing. I mean, it does happen. So we're also saying that within the tier 1 that we would like to hear from these residents whether or not they will purchase by December 31st of 2025 and purchases completed by March 31st of 2026. And this is also based on some deadlines that have been set by HUD in our approval letter. So tier 2, next slide, please. So tier 2, this is the down payment assistance program, permanent affordability through land trust, and the rent to own program. And within this model, we're anticipating releasing small batches of vacant homes for sale that are then open to bidding by the tier 2 buyer that is represented by a nonprofit. And let's see, clock opens the bidding for the homes. For the CBOs, we're going to release an RFQ for nonprofits to be pre-approved to then be able to bid on these homes. So we'll have sort of like a mini RMLS, internal to the housing authority. These will not be released out to the public. Those are specifically for the pre-approved nonprofits through the RFQ process. We will have hired a realtor or a brokerage company to represent us to be able to lead the CBOs and supported households on tours and to be able to coordinate that sort of internal listing process and setting bid deadlines. And we will then apply the preferences of mortgage readiness for pre-approved households, as well as a preference of permanent affordability. And then if through those preferences, we do not have one identified buyer, if there are still multiple applicants that are remaining after the preferences are applied, then we would go through a lottery. So next slide. In the fall of 2024, so basically from now through the end of the year, we anticipate beginning the relocation process with the consultant that has been that won the RFQ process. That's Darcy Vinson Consulting DDV Consulting, sorry, LLC, owned by Dorsey Benson. And we are also finalizing our approach with the sales with HUD and coming up with a tenant relocation plan with the relocation consultant. Once they're on board, they will be approved at the October 1 Housing Authority board meeting, that their contract will be approved, and then we can officially begin working on our tenant relocation plan. So as we mentioned, we're going to do the RFQ, the request for qualifications from the community-based organization partners to work with us on tier 2. And then we will solicit an RFP for a real estate brokerage and title company that is coming up soon. It's in the works right now, has not been released yet. And we're going to have them, the broker, update our broker price opinion and assess the housing units for sale readiness, as well as, you know, once we get into the tier 1 and tier 2 actual sales, they'll be our representative for that. So what we are here today for is to, you know, present this framework to the Housing Advisory Committee and receive a recommendation of approval to our Housing Authority Board on the disposition framework. So that is our definition of an eligible buyer, including that the tier 2 buyer income be a maximum of 100% AMI in coordination with the first home model that is through our community development division. The 10% discount off of the current market value for tier 1 and tier 2 home buyers. Subsidy forgiveness over time, starting at year 10. And then a preference for permanent affordability, although it should be noted that permanent affordability is not a requirement because the funds can be used for down payment assistance. So that's the end of my presentation. Now we'll take questions. Nathan, it sounds like you had one or
Yeah,
two.
there was a lot in there.
Yeah.
I had like 10, but just an observation, my organization, the HUD approved housing counseling agency, there are obviously others. We do use down payment assistance from the state, have a couple of different grants to do that. And those come with like a different structure in terms of forgiveness and so on that was here. So just to mention that probably other CBOs also access the same funding. Just to note that you're creating a very complicated structure for the homeowner, right? In terms of how that forgiveness is gonna work. They're gonna have multiple layers, they're gonna go on to title. They're probably not gonna understand it, right? And so just saying that whenever the time comes that somebody buys it and then sells it in the future, they're probably not gonna understand what's going on when they go to title and they're told like, well, you can't get this and you can't, you know, you're not getting the full price. And so just saying, it seems complicated to me. The other question I had though was the CBO track. You know, you outlined 3 options, I think there, Melissa, right? So the rent to own would be a CBO buys probably a home or some homes and then places people into a rent to own. Those are obviously not the current residents of the homes,
I
right?
think it could be.
Why don't I answer
Oh,
the
sure.
questions one at a time?
Oh, okay, okay, sure.
I think that's probably easiest
Okay,
because,
sure.
it's gonna be hard, I think, for us to.
Sorry, yeah, sure.
The first one about the complicated, layers of subsidy. We went back and worked very closely with, our colleagues in the Office of Community Development. Part of the framework was we wanted to make sure that as one Washington County, we didn't have all different programs that Washington County itself was proposing. So we know that, under the homeownership program, we have sort of the down payment assistance program, as well as the permanent affordability program. The rent to own program that you're talking about, we are expecting that to come in through our RFQs. We actually haven't seen the whole program design of any CBOs with a rent to own. We just heard there are CBOs out there with a rent to own. So we are opening this program for any of those The three programs we listed, if you don't mind going back one more slide.
Yeah. This one?
No, the next one. Back. I
Oh,
think
back.
It's slide.
The
three,
bubbles,
maybe.
they're
There.
very.
Under that, you see the first tier, we have talked about the 3-tier sales. Tier 1 is, with the existing home residents, right? Tier 2 is the different options we have heard from our CBOs that are available for income qualified buyers. There's a down payment assistance, there's a permanent affordability, and the rent to own. We have seen the down payment assistance programs and the permanent affordability programs in, sort of rolled out in our current county. We have yet to see a proposal for the rent to own. So those rent to own options, we would gladly welcome any proposer with any program. The details of that, we can't say because we haven't seen it yet. So that's the first one. And then going back to the complications for the homeowner when they buy, I would agree, yes. And that is the difficulty with running a program where it's state, there's federal, there's local, and there's city. So we have heard different things from, Hyder, Forest Grove, all of the different localities. Some of them may have homeownership programs, some of them don't, some of them work through CBOs. So what we're trying to do in terms of the forgiveness portion is just at least to align Washington County itself. Not necessarily align with HUD, align with the state, because we know the state also has their homeownership program, but we're just trying to align internally, our own county. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, sorry, I
There's
didn't,
feedback,
Yeah.
at large, I think, you got Shannon here, you got.
yeah, and that makes sense, and that, yeah.
And for feedback, we would love to.
I mean, you're gonna have title do some complicated math itself, right?
Yes.
So they're gonna be like, okay, 20% after a 10-year, so anyway.
Yeah.
And
And then if it's overlaid with another down payment assistance loan, then it's gonna be.
And that's
That's
why
the
we
nature.
are hiring, as you noted, we're hiring that real estate broker and title, because what we've heard from HUD is every single sale. That's all 60, they want a complete package. Right?
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, here is 10 sales. They want every single sale for every single unit. They want to see a complete package, which is appraisal, title report, loan, mortgage, all of that. So it's our own mortgage is about, 2 inches thick. This is probably going to be double that.
Yeah.
If I may add, so for the tier 2, the way that I think about it is that what we heard from the CBOs is that they facilitate, the down payment assistance. Oh, can you go back to where? Is this facilitated loan, right? That the CBO isn't actually purchasing, it's facilitated by the CBO for the purchase. The CBO permanent affordability and rent to own, the permanent affordability kind of has 2 options, right? A CBO, like a land trust, could come in and purchase and then turn around, or a land trust could come in with a buyer that then has the long-term affordability. So that has 2 options, and the rent to own is, as Jill said, a response to our CBO community that said that some of them mentioned that they want to be able to have these programs. So this is really us as a pass-through for these program opportunities. We are not actually creating these kinds of programs. We just have the product, and the organizations with the programs come through our system in order to implement.
We have 2 more, just, we have 2 hands raised. Yeah, there's,
Bruce, I believe you had your hand raised first.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple questions. Michael will be thrilled to know none of them have to do with finance, so yay me.
Thanks, Bruce.
And so a couple questions. Number one, if I was listening properly, of the 60 units, at first glance, there's about 20% that are potential identified as possibility. Did I see that right? Of the 60 right now in terms of buyers?
Of the current residents, go back a slide or 2.
Yeah, about 20%, a little less, right? If you put them into 2 tiers.
Yeah.
3, 6 or so. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I saw that right. And I guess my question is, with the CBOs, are we looking for more CBOs, or do we feel like we have adequate number of CBOs to facilitate any purchases?
We have reached out to as many CBOs as we could who have said or indicated any interest.
Or they have reached out to us.
Or
like
have reached out to
Star
Yes.
and Westfall. But it's
And-
like 6 or 7 or 8.
Yeah, it's eight right now, and we have also reached out to all the local jurisdictions like Beaverton, Hillsborough and Tigard and asked them if they had other CBOs that we should reach out to. So we've got that list and it's right now 8.
8, okay, great.
So if there are any more, we would love to hear them.
Well, and the reason I asked that question, just as a reminder, some of you know my career was mortgage-backed securities and residential lending. And those entities tend to be volume driven. So if I were to say, gosh, there's a great opportunity and it's 3 units over 6 months, you don't get much momentum there. The reason I ask is this an opportunity to create on a private side an opportunity that says, hey, this disposition is one component of what we're doing, but over time, over the next 2 or 3 years, there's lots of rent to buy or down payment assistance or home ownership opportunities that aren't necessarily just this Section 8 discussion. Is that real? Are there other rent to own or ownership opportunities that will be created in Washington County over the next 2 to 3 years if you had a new private quote CBO? Hopefully that question makes sense.
So I'm gonna answer a little more globally, which the Section 18 disposition, as a part of it, we reached out to Clackamas County. And we also heard from a local nonprofit here. And between Clackamas County and the local nonprofit and our program, we anticipate in the next 3 years in the TriMet area, there's probably going to be about 500 homes available for affordable home ownership through either Section 18 or nonprofits selling their single family home portfolios. So there is kind of a potential surge in the area.
Okay.
And then just from a Washington County perspective, the community development group has affordable home ownership down payment assistance. But in terms of actual homes, this is the only program that we currently have where we're looking at the disposition of homes for home ownership for low and moderate income households.
Got it. And you
One other, just for your information, when we talk about CBOs, these are all nonprofits.
Right.
So I think if there is a new nonprofit coming in who would like to be able to leverage financing for the low income community we're trying to serve, then we would welcome them. For example, in the Housing Oregon conference yesterday, HUD was showing that they had more programs, especially through HUD, you can call it HUD approved lenders. So that was another, we're also just trying out. This is the first of our program, sort of like a pilot. So we would love to hear if there's more, community-based organizations who would be willing to work with our residents, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for the answer. It was my question was kind of outside the dots on thinking that private entities who have a balance sheet, who aren't necessarily nonprofit, do have some component of doing good for the community, right? Not just net income based. And so you answered the question. So thanks for that perspective.
So previously Melinda had her hand up and her question was she has to hop off the call, but her question was for current residents living in the housing, if they are able to purchase, will the houses be sold as is or will work be done before they buy?
We are evaluating the sellability right now of each of the homes. And, for some of them, they will need maybe some minimal, improvements just to make sure that it is meeting all the HUD standards for sale. many of the different CDOs, especially like this Habitat, has also told us they actually want to work with the home buyers to improve, you can call it the interior and even some of the exterior, because they have equipment that they would like to be able to, upgrade. So it depends, I think, on a case-by-case basis. If that, because we haven't gone through all the units at this time.
Thank you for
Um,
that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the 3 questions, does that mean it's for you then? Yeah.
Well, one was, who are the 8 CBOs, and then, so Vienna Star is one.
There is Vienna Star, there is Portland Housing Center, there is Proud Ground, there is the Habitat Quality, Habitat Portland, NAYA, and the African American Center for Homeownership, is that the right line?
Yep.
Is that 8?
5, 6, 7, 7. And I think there's one more.
And as an RFP, it will be
Yeah, I was
open,
gonna say, you're
so it's
sending
not a
out.
closed group now. When we open up the RFP, we welcome you to also forward it to any organizations you know. Ideally, organizations that have access to down payment assistance or have access to capital. One of the other things we've been doing is touching base with various CDFI lenders in the area so that they can know that our CDO partners may be interested in loans to purchase multiple homes. And so that, they can get some access to capital if they want to have their own program. So we've also been letting our lenders know about that as well.
Hacienda was 8.
Yeah.
Could those CBOs be listed in the notes, just so when I forget, I'll know?
And so then my second question is, are these organizations, they would be purchasing the home and adding it to their portfolio to then use in their programs, or?
Under the tier 2, it could go directly to a resident or a household that's qualified. Or it could go into the CBO, because we know these CBOs are already committed for home ownership. Part of our requirements under the RFQ will be, tell us how quickly and what is your, end date. Because the goal is home ownership, right? So you don't want them to just buy it and put it in their portfolio for a decade and not sell it and not give somebody the opportunity for home ownership. That's not the purpose. The purpose here is for individuals, low-income households, to get the home ownership opportunity.
So they would have a qualified buyer ready that they would.
Yes,
Okay.
ideally.
Except for Proud Ground would be purchasing.
Well,
And then some.
Well, or they may have somebody who's already ready and they have that course. So we
want both paths,
yeah,
Right.
the both.
But Proud Ground is a land trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then they would own the land.
Yeah.
And that's
Um,
also- yeah.
Can I acknowledge, Chair, that we have 2 minutes left on this agenda item and we have 2 questions left, so.
Well, we have actually 3, I think.
Okay,
Two in
3.
here and one more.
All right, so John had a question.
Yeah, question or quick comment. So one, on the rent to own, it's really selling it to the CDO and they rent, or we're holding it and renting it? I was confused on that point.
It depends. We haven't seen a program yet, for the description of the rent to own. We just heard from at least our community-based organizations, that there is programs for rent to own and development.
Okay,
So
but it's them
could
doing it.
be-
Okay, and then my other quick comments are, I assume you're talking to mortgage lenders like us layering in our debt and all these other programs, because it seems to me a lot of times on these home ownerships, a big difficulty when you have a lot of different layers of debt is finding lenders who will actually do it.
Right.
And so I guess we're looking at that, what our program proposes versus other programs out there, and we're not creating a model that you can't find people to lend into it. You make your pool so small. So I'm sure we're looking at that and talking to people.
The main thing we would like to do is that the commercial, you can call it commercial mortgage, is still gonna be the first lien, right? You're not
Right,
gonna
no,
get
and I
any
know that,
better.
but sometimes you start layering in so much debt, even traditional commercial lenders just have issues with it. I'm sure you're looking into it. I'm not trying to, I'm just saying it's a conversation. right?
And then
And we're
Andy,
hoping that with the CBOs who are working with the low-income buyers, they should or would have already navigated which lenders are willing to work with their programs.
and then Mandy posed a question as well for the tier 3 sales. Will they be limited to owner occupied buyers or will you allow purchase by organization, speculators, etc.?
So it's our intention, written into the draft of our RFP for the broker to explore those questions. I mean, we really don't want that just as much as anyone else. We don't want investors and, you know, second homeowners, whatever it might be to be buying those homes. So, that's what we're going to work with the brokerage on formulating whatever we can do to prevent those things from happening.
Awesome, thank you. And just a reminder, so we're at time for that discussion. We are looking for a motion to pass this disposition 18 or section 18 disposition framework. Do we have enough information? Huh?
We still had more questions,
One more.
Renee.
Oh, sorry, missed it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I was trying to understand sort of in layman's terms, when you say that there's a 10% discount, what does that translate into when it comes to who could act, like how affordable is that? Does that put the sale of these homes in someone who is at 80% AMI? Like what does that translate to?
Our average, at least right now, our Zillow value for the average home. Is 465,000.
Okay.
So 10% discount is 46,500 less. So it'd just be under 400,000.
Okay.
That is maybe affordable to somebody in our current list of AMIs. Let me just pull it up. Just got it.
Based on family size.
Based on family size, for example, 100% AMI for family for right now in the metropolitan area is 116,900, so almost 117,000. That is very close to 100% AMI. I know in our current list of families who are in here, there's one that has a family of 5, and 5 at 100% AMI is 126,000. So that could be affordable.
Okay.
If you have a family of 6, 100% AMI is 135,000. And we have another one that's 6.
But the discount rate is
Yeah.
consistent with how we have generally subsidized homeownership as a
Okay.
county under the Office of Community Development. What's the subsidy max you guys offer?
I think under the DPALs, it is what, 80,000?
Yeah, and in our recent, we just had a recent RFP, and so it does allow up to 125,000 per household in down payment assistance, so.
And our CBOs that we've talked with at least have indicated some of them have existing funds from OHCS, from HUD, so that we're trying to essentially pair our 10% discount with whatever is happening.
Okay.
And based on what we've seen from other sales that has occurred, multiple you can call it leverage opportunities are made available, so the lower income residents can purchase.
Okay. My last comment is that to me, I'm a little confused about the sort of intent or the goal here. When it comes to creating opportunities for homeownership. Is the intent to just give the opportunity for homeownership to preserve affordability? Or is it to allow for those which are purchasing the homes to generate wealth? In other words, one of the goals is to preserve affordability, and therefore you have this 30-year subsidy challenge, which is very complicated, as Nathan was saying. And one of these residents who then purchases, it goes to sell, they don't have the opportunity like others to create wealth with homeownership. To me, that seems unfair. Like if what we're trying to do here is create opportunity for those and to rise up and be equitable, saying that then we're also trying to preserve affordability is sort of how do I put it, in conflict. And so to me, that there is trying to be very clear about what the goal is here for those which are looking for homeownership is something that I think I just think it needs to be a little bit clearer because it's a lot to ask someone who's looking for homeownership to go through. And then to say, by the way, but when you go to sell, you still don't have a chance for really creating wealth here, which is really what someone who is looking for homeownership should be trying to achieve.
We were trying to balance the
Yeah.
very basic thing
Okay.
about wealth creation versus permanent affordability, right? Yeah, so in the selling process, our intent for the 10% was any program that had down payment, permanent affordability, rent to own, we were, you can call it, not, is whoever came in for each individual home.
Okay.
Right? The only time in which we put a preference was for permanent affordability. So if more than one offer came into the same home,
Okay.
it would be the permanent affordability.
Okay.
Because we like struggle.
Yeah.
How do we balance wealth creation with permanent affordability? Because it is the public subsidy that is allowing folks to be able to, you know, have that home
Sure.
ownership opportunity.
Sure.
And my understanding, at least from having our understanding from discussions with the folks like Habitat and Power Ground is there is that availability of wealth creation, it's just not as high as you had on a down payment assistance program.
Okay.
So is that trying to balance it? So we absolutely agree
Okay,
with you. We
okay.
internally struggle and
Yeah.
for weeks trying to figure out how we can do this.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
And
thank you.
I would say also that we had looked, we're not even talking about shared equity. The home buyer keeps all equity. And so very advanced programs do shared equity. And we're not doing that and we're not proposing that. We've discussed everything. There are programs, other down payment assistance programs that forgive after 5 years. Habitat for Humanity starts at 20 years. So it's an encouragement for people to be within the home, and I feel like we kind of hit a happy medium with the starting at 10 years of forgiveness.
Okay.
And also I think there's an aspect of these federal funds of just forgiving them didn't feel quite right, but they're recycled back into homeownership if they are collected. If somebody does sell, you know, before the 10 years, so. It's a big balancing act.
Sure. No, thank you for describing your thoughts on balancing.
And one last question, the people who could possibly, on tier one, could possibly buy, is there somebody walking with them to let them know what all these programs are available and kind of help them navigate on that?
Yeah, so when the tenants were first alerted to that your home is in the Section 18 program, we had a contract and still do with Vienna Star for a first point of contact to be able to talk to them about could I buy my home? You know, would I qualify? There's homebuyer education classes, all that sort of thing available from the beginning. And as we have moved along and done more recent mailings and outreach, we have contacted all of the tenants who are at 50% AMI or higher and encourage them to contact Vienna Star or other agencies. There's going to be more tenant contact where we will have additional one-on-one conversations because I don't think we can be clear enough about the possibility of homeownership when people might not, you know, they're like, well, I only earn 50,000 a year. I'm not gonna be able to buy a house and not really understand that it's possible. So it's ongoing.
And that was really my question, is people who are thinking, well, I can't, then who's saying, well, actually, here's the roadmap, yeah, okay.
We have an additional question from Bruce.
Sorry, I know we're going over on this, but I guess my comment or question is to John's point, Renee's point, these people are still buying an asset. So if you buy an asset at 10% below given market now, that starts to create wealth. If you can make that payment over a period of time, most people stay in a house 7 to 10 years. So if you can make that payment over a period of time, then to John's point, if it's then not fraught with lien structure when you try to sell it, that then hits to me what Renee was talking about, affordability and building wealth. And that was kind of the premise of my question on looking at the private sector. So just, it's been said, but I love this subject, so I'll always raise my hand. I think that combination of always understanding you're buying an asset, and if you buy an asset, quote, at a discount, that's a great start towards wealth, but you can't get to the wealth if it's fraught with liens when you try to sell it, or you can't make that payment in the next 7 to 10 years. So anyway, that was just the point I was trying to make.
All right. And with that, are there any further questions or comments?
Yeah.
One more Renee.
Thank you.
The, first off, the committee's questions are amazing in this. It's been exciting to hear all of these. One of the better back and forths that we've had, I think, since I've been on here. To Haley's point, I wanted to bring up the overall goal of this process, and to focus on that from the beginning probably would have helped, not only what Haley was talking about, but what we're doing with the proceeds of these sales. That it's not, we want to make sure that it's not just the county offloading troubled properties to cover operational debts. That this is to utilize that capital to reinvest in more affordable housing. And to focus on that from the beginning would help.
And I did want to mention, we didn't highlight it in here, is one of the outcomes we are seeking is funding for affordable housing. So that we can redeploy the proceeds into more affordable housing. And I think you all have heard our wait list on our vouchers is 18,000 households. So it's a huge lift to try to even address a small portion of that. So the proceeds from here is going to have to go into affordable housing. That's a HUD requirement. That's also a HOG desire. So the use of proceeds are much more restricted because it's HUD, of course. But thank you for raising that.
I think it could be helpful. I mean, we do talk about how we're trying to balance two outcomes, so we really hone in on. There's sort of a double win, triple win in all this, because it's, the 60 units will turn into hundreds.
Right.
That's the leveraging piece. It will take us more time. We may not get to an exact amount of bedroom size. We'll release replicate number, but we won't be able to necessarily exactly match the total kind of homes, because that's why we're getting out of single family homes. We can't sustain the operational. So there's a double effect. We'll reduce the amount of our operating deficits. And yes, the sales proceeds have to go back towards future affordable housing. That's really the whole point of this. Trying to do, we're hearing you, we'll sharpen our pencils just a little bit before we're gonna pause, see if there's anything else we can do to kind of make it a little bit less complicated, just to see if there's ways to even align even more. But yes, the idea being we know we're one tool of many that need to go in to really do create affordable homeownership and create wealth, and be able to people to realize that appreciation at a time that's appropriate.
And I called Haley Renee. Sorry about that, Haley.
Oh, forgive me.
I'm the senior member. I get one pass.
And I want this conversation because this is
I know you want a recommendation, but Nathan or maybe others, I'm just curious, 30 years sounds like a long time to me. Does that align with other subsidy programs you've seen on forgiveness of debt going out 30 years before you get it all forgiven that you work with?
Like I mentioned, they're kind of all over the place, and the Habitat model starts forgiveness at 20 and then is full forgiveness at 30. Other programs forgive fully at 5. I think it was the
Portland Housing Bureau's program is year 15, you forgive, I think half. And then by year 30 is full forgiveness. So it's all for 30 years.
All right, so it sounds like other programs. I just didn't want to find out everybody else is like at 15 and we're, I was just sort of curious. It sounds like there's other programs that go out that far. Okay, thank you.
Great points. All right. Am I missing any other hands or questions? Okay, if not, it's time then to consider making a motion? Is there anybody willing to make a motion for this section 18 disposition?
Motion to approve, is that what we're doing?
Yes, please. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Okay, none. Are there any abstentions?
I feel like I should abstain again, just because we have a conflict.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so we have one abstention and then it looks like the motion carries. Thank you. Great discussion, everybody. I'm going to now pass it over to Jill to share about preservation.
Thank you. This one will not be hopefully as controversial. But it will be a meaty discussion. Go ahead. Just gonna go quickly through and try to make up some time. Next slide. This is just a quick overview about the housing, the regulated affordable housing. What are we talking about when we talk about preservation and expiring regulatory agreements and addressing these expiring use properties? Some of the tools and some of the examples of what we have seen are looking to do. Next slide, please. Quick landscape of affordable housing in the state. You'll see that we as Washington County represents about 12% of all regulated units in the state. The amount of housing authority and or Department of Housing Services controlled units are over 900 units. Our total DHS HAWK invested portfolio, this means using Metro Housing bonds, project-based Section 8, HAWK issued private activity bonds or special limited partnerships, we're about 3,600 units. And working with our Office of Community Development with home funds, there's about another 1,100 units. So the county itself touches more than 50% of all of the housing units, affordable housing units in the county. So just as a quick note, this is all data from OHCS. Next slide, please. So what does it mean when it says affordable housing? You know, who are we talking about and who do they represent and how expensive are these units? We talk about the very low income, which is from 0 to 30% AMI. And that's probably a couple living on Social Security. And it's not, their affordability is really limited. So we're talking about one bedroom that's under $700 a month. The next group is say the 31 to 60% area median income. And that's probably a preschool teacher, talking about 35 to 45, 50, $60,000 in income. They're probably going to be able to rent a one bedroom that is around $1,300. And the max rent at a 60% AMI is $1,327. The next level, which is 61 to 80% AMI, is say a carpenter, tradesman, folks who are 2 minimum wage workers. And at 80% AMI, we're talking about a rent of on one bedroom, $1,770. For the whole, we just talked about this earlier, whole metropolitan statistical area, family of 4 is at $116,900 a year. Next slide, please.
Can I take a picture of that? Am I allowed to do that?
Oh, we'll actually send you all these slides.
Oh, you will, okay.
I was thinking the same thing.
It's very helpful, so.
Yes, for
Thank you.
us as well, we were thinking, who are we really talking about?
Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes it's really nice to sort of reset that understanding. Thank you.
Welcome. And the affordable housing preservation, a lot of people talk about preservation in different ways. The salmon one is what we're gonna focus on today, which is those that have expiring regulatory agreements. There are some other, you can call it preservation discussions. That's the physical deterioration of our projects. You guys all were here when we talked about the re-syndication of our own projects because they had, falling, I think balconies, mold issues, roofing issues. That's when it's physical deterioration. We also saw in Oregonian today about operational difficulties where the non-payments, with a lot of our NGOs, their financial operational difficulties. But today, we're actually just focused on expiring regulatory agreements. Those that normally happen within 30-year regulatory agreement. Next slide, please. What does it mean to have expiring regulatory agreements and how does it come about? Who owns it? What happens when a project converts to market? The restriction expires, there could be defaults on those. So not going to go into all those details because we just don't have time. So I'm going to go next slide. And these slides will be, you will have it. What are we talking about when we talk about expiring regulatory agreements? First, on a global scale, in the Oregon itself, we have in the Tri-County, over 4,600 units are expiring. In the whole state, over 4,600 are expiring. In the Tri-County, it's almost 3,000 units. In Washington County alone, it is almost 600 units. In the next 10 years, it's in the Tri-County, it's 5,300. Just in Washington County alone, it's a sizable portion of our portfolio. OHCS itself estimates over $1 billion needed to just preserve expiring affordable units. They understand that it's going to be extremely expensive. So, some numbers about what has been occurring in the past. So it's a little disconcerting when we see how many is falling away and how much money is needed, but then looking at how much money has been put in so far. Next slide, please. What does it mean in our county? Over the next 5 years, 569 is expiring. Bethany Meadows, 340, Hawthorne Villa, 119, Terrace View, 100, Aloha, Project 10. We actually have just seen last week, Briar Creek also came onto the market. It's over 200 units. That's also going to be sold. And that's over the next 10 years. Over the next 10 years, it's 1,334, almost 14% of all of our regulated units. It's huge. Some good news. I'll go to the end. Just like, where's the good news? Where's the good news? Some timelines. This is the timeline for the at-risk properties. So I just put out what happens to these at-risk properties. The owners notify OHCS and us as a local government 3 years before the expiration. And then there is a process by which also the tenants get notified. And that's where I always get really worried, because when tenants get notified that they're going to be potentially in a non-regulated unit, it is nerve-wracking. They're going to look at it as, this is potential eviction. What am I going to do? There is some, I don't want to say good news, but there is that safe harbor, which is a 3-year period from the expiration that the rents in those units cannot go up by more than 5% per annum. So between the time in which the tenants get notified to the time in which there is no rent protection. It's almost 5 years. So there are some, you know, call it some good news in that the state legislature passed the safe harbor rule, but that doesn't prevent things like what we've seen in Wood Spring, where our tenants got really tense. Next slide. The risk to conversion to market, just wanted to talk about what are, you know, what is more likely and not likely. Where do we want to prioritize whatever funds we have, whatever we can do to help stabilize our tenants? You know, owned by for-profit versus not. Project not meeting their financial hurdles. Properties with financial difficulties. We also know even nonprofits sometimes have to sell their properties because they themselves on a corporate basis also face financial difficulties. Properties needing major improvements, rehabs. We even heard in our own housing authority discussions, some of the housing authorities are talking about selling because they cannot meet the capital improvements. Their whole portfolio is at risk. You know, expiring project-based Section 8 voucher. So these are some of the issues that we are all facing. Next slide, please. What do we mean when we talk about saving a project? How, you know, what can we do to save it? One of the things we found also about Wood Spring is we have to have a seller willing to sell. And ideally, prior to the accretion of all the gains in a project, we know once that the project has no longer has any restrictions, you can see the dollar signs, right? Because they can raise the rent. We're seeing it right now in Briar Creek. The broker is saying the value now being rented at about, I think, $1,400 per unit. To market, the differential is over $700. If they can capture that, the seller, $700 on 200 units over the life of the project, I mean, the life of a building is huge, right? So you need to have that willingness to have that accretion of value, what's it all in cost, the availability of funding, operational viability, all that. Next slide. What are some of the tools? So it's not all doom and gloom. What tools do we have? One of the first things we want to talk about is the legislative ask. All of you as citizens, as stakeholders, there's a huge preservation ask. OHCS is asking 350 million. Housing Alliance is asking for 200. Me personally, I would hope we go towards the 350. The need is huge. There's also a potential tenant protection relocation fund that's in discussion. That's with Representative Keith Patterson. There is that prioritization we talked about in the past about private activity bonds. How can we as local housing authorities use private activity bonds to help preserve more of these projects? The 501c3 bonds, meaning nonprofit bonds for acquisitions, leveraging others, all the residents' toolkits. Next slide, please. So I don't need to talk about that example because you guys already lived that one. I did want to say one thing here is in Wood Spring, you'll see that the ask all in of almost 286 purchase price was high. That's July 2020. I currently am being offered product that's market rate at 275. So you can see there is a differential, right? Or 280, but so there is that, we pay pretty much market price for that. And then there's still the rehab needs. We're right now going into a resyndication. We think it's gonna be over 100,000 per unit. Roofs need membrane, sidings, the whole list. It's just a huge amount of work that's needed. Next slide. Preservation. Before we got Wood Spring into the push program, meaning getting 25 million from OHCS, we had also talked about a tenant relocation and protection pilot. This is how do you stabilize tenants? What kind of relocation and or rental support and or, you know, utilities, you know, down, you know, first rent, first, you know, call it
Last month's rent.
first and last month, thank you, deposits. What can we provide these tenants to help them, if not, you know, get to another place? How can they help? You know, we have that 5-year, you know, sort of running. How could we help them maybe move to another place? So this was one that was being discussed. It is still being discussed at the state level. Next slide, please. Upcoming regulatory. The good news here, yay, good news. Bethany Meadows 1 and 2. We're in discussions with Bridge Housing to purchase it from GSL and to keep it affordable. So that means over 50% of our expiring regulatory agreement units are going to be saved. However, what does it mean for the other Hawthorne Villa and Terrace View? There's still a huge risk, and we are in the process of trying to figure out what to do next and reach out to the seller. And next slide, please. What does it mean? Tools for preservation. One of the things we are looking at is, for example, with Bethany Meadows, how do we save it? We're working with Bridge. The PSA, the purchase sale agreement, is closing middle of next month. We are working with them to use the nonprofit bonds. We're working with them to say, okay, if it doesn't pencil, we'll float up to 80% AMI. What's that balance? They are targeting 40% of it to be retained at 60% AMI, and the balance to potentially be able to float up in order to pay their debt. Because in order to buy this building, they have to still borrow. And just as an FYI, I can't say what the price is. It's significantly below what we pay for Woodspring. Significantly to that. Items for discussion, last slide. I just wanted to make all of you aware of the potential issue. If you can, to advocate for preservation resources, leverage whatever tools we have, and we're looking to expand partnerships for acquisition on properties. So this is not just, you know, for example, we're working with Bridge, just as an FYI. On this property, Bridge is probably, I think, putting up over 20 million of their own funds. They have 20 million, they're borrowing. I think the acquisition itself is over 65 million. So they're borrowing over 30 million, putting up, let me just make sure I got the numbers right, about 30 million in equity, of which about 25 they are using other people's equity, meaning impact investors, mission aligned investors. There's an equity fund that they're using, and they're putting up their own balance sheet for like 6-7 million. It's huge. We don't expect our partners to have that kind of funding. I mean, to put up 30 million at a pop, that's a lot of money. So we need to look at who is in the market, who's going to be available to put that up. Coordination with our community-based partners, nonprofit, to help get the tenant information out, meaning who do they call? What are other affordable housing units available? Where are other tenants? I mean, landlords. Some of them may have tenant tenant vouchers. Where can they go? Who can they go with? And also communicate with stakeholders and impacted residents. It's going to be a tough one, especially for the residents, to be notified that they're not going to be having homes. So that's the quick summary. Any questions? Yes?
I have a comment, which just for on the advocacy side, Jill, which for the state legislature, and just for context for everyone, in case you don't know. Even though those seem like big numbers, and they are, on a per unit basis, you mentioned the 280, right, Jill, for the the Woodspring, the acquisition. I know there's more costs, but if you just think what does it cost to build a new unit? It
Yeah.
costs way more than that,
Yes.
unfortunately, right? So if you just think a little bit apples to apples here, like you're preserving the unit, not losing it. Or cheaper than it costs to build a new unit, and it sounds like you're considering private acquisitions, which I
Yes.
know the strategy I've heard Portland is also thinking of, or at least I've seen that floated. I had a really quick technical question about the float up on the
Yeah.
slide. So I understand Bridge needs to borrow, and so they need to show income, and I get all that. So it sounds like there's at least some scenario where some of the families would become rent burdened. If it floats up, like say they're 50% AMI, but the rents have to float up to 80 for Bridge to be able to cover its debt. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Turnover. Bridges only
At
looking
turnover.
turnover.
Ah,
Only at turnover.
I see. So it won't, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's one of the things we're working with them, so it's only at turnover. So,
And to Nathan's point from an advocacy standpoint. And from rent burdened, people that are in 30% AMI, if they're paying 30% of their income, they're still rent burdened. And a lot of those people also have medical bills that make them healthcare burdened as well. So getting that, they can pay 30% towards their rent, getting that down would help that population. And the other one is that in OHCS right now, for a lot of these projects that require that need to be fixed up now, OHCS has separate funds for that. Unfortunately, they removed the developer fee on those emergency rehabs. So it's really hard for small nonprofits to rehab their emergency properties because they can't do that without that developer fee.
Brian, just to comment, that makes an excellent point, because OHS is trying to stretch their dollars as much as possible. I frankly would rather have more resources to keep as much deeper affordability as we possibly can. There's gonna be having to be some sort of tiering of approach. We don't have all the resources to save every single one, but OHS needs to fully recognize that when you don't have the funds to even do the planning work to do the rehab, then you can't ever get to the rehab. Or and you can't then save it, and you need to develop asset management fees above the line. So there's a lot of talk about that.
And Nathan, in response, also, I think we are so used to having new construction because the metro bonds required new, just like the Portland metro bonds required new. When I look at the numbers, for example, even with Bethany Meadows with Bridge, their request to OHCS was about $100,000 per unit. Compared to currently what they're paying for lift for new construction is over $300,000 per unit.
Right.
So the numbers in terms of preservation is so much more cost effective than it is for new construction.
Just a financing question, so Bridge and Bethany, they're not looking at using tax credits, they're using investor dollars and just taxes and bonds to do this financing?
That is correct. There is no 4% LIHTC at this point because LIHTC is
80% AMI, because so they can float them all up to 80 if they have to, that's why, I guess, so. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Obviously, if they re-syndicate at some point in time, they'll have to bring them back down to 60 unless they do something.
Well, they can do some at 80 as long as they hit an average of 60, I guess, right? Is that yeah.
I had a question about the advocacy. Why was there a different ask with Housing Alliance versus OHCS when it comes to the preservation?
We're not quite sure. I think Housing Alliance was trying to be conservative. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, why, I mean, like, when everyone is hearing that, like, still it's not enough, like, why be conservative?
I think they were also wanting to put in really big asks for more eviction prevention.
200 million is not historically conservative. I mean, it's conservative only relative to the really amazing, so,
Yeah.
because I'm involved in Housing Alliance, I can just say.
Okay.
I also think it was based on conversations with Senator Jama, who, so just my understanding, who's like the key guy in the state legislature, who will probably drive this. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have a really big number out there and then, hey, we're the 200 million, we're the reasonable request here, right? But I don't think it was, I don't think the intent was, look, we're gonna play it conservative.
Okay.
It's just, I think they thought it was really ambitious, actually.
Interesting, okay.
That's like 10 times what it's been.
Yeah, right, I mean, it's, if you just look at the numbers historically, it's a huge number. Yeah.
We were able to get 200 million for preservation, I believe, last biennium. Or 2 biennium, and then we got 15 last year, just 15. The problem is they made it, everyone kind of started getting too restrictive in terms of the eligibility of those funds, but yet they have, OHS themselves have a whole database. If you go on their dashboard, showing how many thousands of units are going to expire in the next 5 years. So they're trying to make the case that there is a sustained need that's way beyond this, closer to a billion. That being said, I think we're also hearing the forecast is going to come out later in this year, and it's more likely to be way less revenue.
All right. Are there any further comments or questions? Thank you, Jill, for the presentation. It was very informative. I look forward to seeing the slide presentation shared out to the group when you have time. Moving on to new business. I think is it Eva, you're up with the
This
consolidated.
is actually gonna be me. Eva is with our team with community development, but I'll be presenting. So is Shannon.
Awesome. All right, go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you. My name is Shannon Wilson and I'm the program manager of our Office of Community Development. And so we do work closely with housing and other departments too in the county. We are a distinct component of the county as an office. And so today I wanted to share with you our 2025 to 2029 consolidated plan. A lot of the work our office does is administering federal funding from HUD. And so the consolidated plan is required as a part of that every 5 years. And a lot of the funding that we administer goes to serve housing needs. All of it goes to serve low and moderate income households and communities. So that's why I wanted to get feedback from your committee on that. So the agenda, I'm just going to move through pretty briefly, just based on the time we have, some findings that we have from the community engagement work that we've done, and then from our needs and market analysis. So all of these are components that are required by HUD, but they're also things that we take very seriously because it's important to understand, you know, of course, the communities that we're serving as we look at deploying this funding. And then I'll share with you our the proposed goals that we have for our next consolidated plan. So as an overview, it is a 5-year plan. And we estimate, because the funding we receive from HUD is unfortunately stagnant year to year, but so we can have a pretty accurate estimate. And so we estimate that we'll have 35 million over the next 5 years to administer in these funding types. It is primarily the Community Development Block Grant Program, Home Investment Partnership Funds, and then Emergency Solution Grant funding. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So in terms of our community engagement process that we've done to date, so kind of before we even, help inform the goals that we have developed, we met with a variety of groups. This is really a change from how we did the process last year. If you guys have been involved in previous processes over the years, in the past, there'd be like a stakeholder group and we would invite different organizations to come and present. And so this time we really tried to flip that and go out to where groups were already meeting and connect with them kind of where they are, with the idea that it was kind of less burdensome for us to go to them and for example, like to come to you, to your committee today, as opposed to asking like you to come to a meeting that we had established. So anyway, so that's been our process so far. This is a list of the groups that we've connected with. And then in addition to that, we also did a survey of community members. And we're able to reach just over 2,200 residents throughout the county. We work in partnership with Beaverton and Hillsborough because they receive their own allocation of some of the funds we administer. And so that was important for us to track the number of residents from those cities that responded to the survey, but over 2,200 in total. And so we can provide these slides if you're interested in more data on them. I'm just going to go pretty high level. So if we go to the next slide. So in terms of the respondent profile versus county demographics, we wanted to make sure that we were reaching a population that reflected the county demographics. And so this chart looks at that and we saw that we were pretty successful in that regard, especially looking at race and ethnicity and looking at income types as well. Age was a little bit more challenging, but we still feel like it was pretty reflective of the demographics of the county. And so some of the kind of the top results from that survey, so it looked at housing needs as well as other community needs for facilities and infrastructure projects. And so the top housing needs, construction of affordable rental housing was the top for Washington County as a whole, and then the cities of Beaverton and Hillsborough, as well as that affordable rental housing for older adults, and then permanent supportive housing as those top three needs. And I think, just considering the prior conversation around preservation, I think we didn't ask a specific question about preservation. It's kind of nuanced for like general public to understand the difference. So I think, when you look at construction of affordable housing, it really is about the production or, I think preservation would be kind of included in that as a top housing need. And then moving on to top facility needs, with our funding that we administer, we've funded a lot of different types of facilities. And so that was why we asked about that need as well. And so you can see the top needs for a mental health center, homeless shelter, and child care center as the top three really emerging there. And then some differentiation for the cities of Beaverton and Hillsborough, where libraries really kind of stand out down there for Beaverton, and a center for abused children and a domestic violence shelter. Some of those kind of abuse facilities stand out for the cities of Hillsborough. And then moving on to the top public services need for the county. And the cities were pretty much in alignment as well. So mental health services, substance abuse services, and rental housing subsidies being those top three needs. And I would really say that, fair housing activities and childcare services being at the top two. And then finally looking at infrastructure needs by jurisdiction. So we also fund a variety of like road improvements and water line improvements. And so looking at those priorities seen by community members were road improvements, sidewalks, and then broadband infrastructure. And so we take all that community engagement data that we put together, and then we have a consultant that then prepares a housing needs analysis and identifies gaps. And so we really combine all that information then to inform our goals. And so I have some data around, it is from 2022. That is the most recent American Community Survey data that's available to look at this type of data. And so this slide has a lot of information on it, but I think it's really, it's really informative. I mean, so I think the key takeaways are that there's clearly the gap there for the 0 to 30% AMI and the number of, it's looking at the existing units in 2022. And so a gap of 16,400 units that are affordable to extremely low income households. And then as you move through, you see the units available at 31 to 50% AMI. There appears to be a little bit of a surplus, but essentially that surplus is really being taken up by those people at 0 to 30% who aren't able to find a unit. And so then those 0 to 30% households that are occupying units at 31 to 50%, then they're most likely to be rent burdened then, even though they're in an affordable unit. And then the same thing, even just more pronounced when you move forward, looking at 51% to 80% AMI. So it appears to be like this surplus of units, but really it's that they're being filled by people at other income levels. So both at the end of the lower end of the spectrum, 0 to 30, and then moving up to look at the 120 plus AMI, there are not a lot of renter units that are, that are maxed out at a rental level that households at that income level could afford. And so households, higher income households are paying less of their income for rent because they're able to get a lot of those units that are probably not between 51 and 60, but between 60% and 80% AMI reflected in that surplus there. So the next slide looks at that data in it's the same data, just in a different way. And so those numbers in the reddish orange identify the cumulative affordability gap. So you can see there the really pronounced gap for households at 0 to 30% AMI of the 16,401 units. And then that, then as you go forward, it takes into account the units available at those different income levels, but although that still doesn't reflect the rent burden of those households necessarily, but it does show the number of physical units and that gap. So then moving on to look at home ownership, that is a part of the analysis as well. And so there's some good data in here around that our consultants have done around home ownership gaps by race and ethnicity. I think what's really significant is the gap in the home ownership rate, especially for Black and African American households. That also, I think that was on maybe a different slide that showed the difference from 2017 to 2022, but that gap actually increased in that 5-year period. And so, so just something of note. Again, a lot of data here, but just something to note from that. And then this is the same type of chart, but looking at home ownership and those gaps. And so clearly a gap in the number of households affordable to extremely low income households. Generally households at 0 to 30% cannot purchase a home. I think what's interesting is that it has the max price and the max income kind of at the bottom there. And so that's some analysis that our consultants have done, based on that 2022 AMI level, what's affordable for households and what they can afford. And so you'll see at a max price of $93,600, like you can't even purchase a condo. There's nothing that you could purchase at that point in the county. And so it just really demonstrates the surplus of units and the inaffordability of housing, of homeownership units in the county. And so then this chart looks at that same data, just a different way, kind of like how it did for the rental gaps. And so identifying that there is a 33% gap in homeownership units that are affordable, even at the 100 to 120% AMI level. And I think what's interesting, it's hard to kind of take all this data in, but, thinking about the rental, that rental gap of rental units that are affordable to 100 to 120% AMI. So then that means those households aren't able to purchase homes either because they're kind of priced out of home ownership. And so then that puts more pressure on the rental market. So just wanted to identify that as a connection between these two needs analysis of both home ownership and rental. And then this slide looks at some of the current and projected future needs for housing. So something our consultants analyze and put together. So definitely the housing need, grows over the 5-year period. And so this reflects this in a variety of ways. And as is most pronounced in all of the different, kind of any way you look at it, the most pronounced need is for those extremely low income households at 0 to 30%. And so like I said earlier, so we've kind of taken all of this data and information and then tried to roll it up into some goals and guidance and priorities, and then goals for how we look at how we use these federal funds within the county. So like I said in the beginning, it's 35 million. So it's really not a lot of money. And so we're thinking about is how we can use it most strategically, like how it can help leverage other larger sources of funds and bring in more overall investment, more state investment, or more regional investment into the county. So our guidance and priorities, they're looking at the urgency of need. So we want to fund things where there is a real urgent need, and some priorities under their ability to address equity gaps, the reverse effects of historical discrimination. And so that's where we are starting to look more at home ownership. We hadn't funded that before with our funding, with our federal funding that comes to our office. And so that is a change that we're looking at for this 5-year period with that equity lens. And then, like I said, the ability to leverage other resources and to utilize that to increase the capacity of our service providers and to bring in more regional investment into the county. And then our new goals for the consolidated plan, and some of you may have been, if you're familiar with the last one, we had like 15 goals in the last consolidated plan. So we're really working to, I know these are broad, but just working to narrow that, narrow those goals. So we have these 4. The first one is around increasing housing stability of low-income renter households, improving public facilities and public infrastructure, specifically that benefit special needs populations and historically underserved people, and then facilitating affordable home ownership and preserving and stabilizing existing homes. We have a housing rehabilitation program that our staff do directly, working with low-income homeowners. And then fund supportive services for low and moderate income people and special needs populations.
Just want to recognize we're at 11, but wondering if folks can save another 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is really just the end. It had the special needs populations there listed. And then it was just if there are any feedbacks or comments that you have on those goals, or those of you familiar with the funding we administer, if you have ideas on how we can do that most strategically, be open to hearing that if you have any more time.
Shannon, will you be sending those slides out?
Yes, yeah, we can send those out. Thank you.
I'll just note that I personally feel like it's lovely that your goal, that you've consolidated your goals, because that sounded like 15 sounded like unmanageable. So I too am working to manage my goals. But second, I like the idea that the goals that you have put forth and consolidated to are in an effort to support instead of create your own goals that are completely separate from some of the other efforts underway here. And so the idea of it being supportive is of some of the efforts already of the county. I think is a nice set of goals. I appreciate.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other
Sounds like-
feedback?
We'll take the help you can get, right?
I thought it was really well done. So I meant with one question.
All right. Any other feedback or questions?
I think too, if it's okay, if I just, with time and a lot of information, just encourage people, if you have any feedback afterwards or just want to email me, that would be great as well. So thank you.
Yeah, we can share your contact.
Thank you. That would be that's a great opportunity for us to chime in. Well done. That was a very informative slide presentation. Thank you. With that, if there's not any other questions or comments, I know that there is number 10, which is department updates. We have those in our packets. And since we're at time, are there any other questions for the good of the order? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Someone needs to, what is it?
So we can't leave unless we vote to adjourn.
There a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, is there a second?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for your time. Well done, staff, on all the presentations.
Thanks all.
Chair.
See you next time. Bye.
All the great discussions, everyone. Gail and I will be